Status, nothing launched 1, no PR, nothing. Same thing as last week, so we need to ship this one. We need to catch Benedek. OrchardCore. OrchardCore. So first for OrchardCore, if I go there, issues, beta 3, boom. Nothing more to do, we can ship. I reschedule one issue to RC because it was not blocking. It's an issue with layers and containers, but very specific case. So we don't care right now. The two other ones have been fixed, so we can look into shipping, testing, and shipping. That's good to know. Then if I look at the changes, so what's the dev branch here? Let's filter on that. So 7 days ago, we talked about this one, fixing all transaction issues, this one, updating request liquid object documentation, which is about, so based on feedback from Jasper, we couldn't find why it was not working. It's because these two properties return an array. So when we say request.query.whatever query parameter you want to read, this is an array. So if you want to access a value, you need to do pipe first, for instance. But I added some explanation about what it is. NavigationBuilder AddAsync because some code inside was async and it needed to be converted to async also. So Jean-Thierry did that. I think he found a bug, or someone reported an issue in some cases and he found the reason to be that. Lucas fix some usage of translations. You should not use interpolated strings or string format into a T here. The T should be a static value. It can take a parameter, but this is the T that will fill the parameter with the arguments here. Yeah. So it always needs to be a static value, never a dynamic value. Even if you want to convert something like a content type display name or something which is added from user, never do that, just static strings. Okay. And he fixed all the occurrences for that. I assume he's working on his tool to extract all the translations, that's why he found those. Peter Kidding fixed the meta entry to correctly be initialized so that it will generate a self-closing tag. This one is from Jean-Thierry, removing some unnecessary calls to AddMvc and AddMvcCore. This one from Matthias to fix the z-index when displaying media models on the media page, so they will not be hidden. Take the PathBase into account for the resource manager and all the locations that were missing the support for the // example, this thing, okay, and also using the // everywhere, just in case you are on IS using a virtual folder, then you need to handle that. fixed package reference, and I have this one and another related PR that is created. So this is from a bug report that when you would publish as self-contained, then it will not work because it will try to actually download the correct references and you will find issues. So in this case we are using ncron tab, ncron tab from here. It was in abstractions, I moved it to core, it doesn't have to be in abstractions. So ncron tab, which was targeting netstandard 1 dot something, and was also depending on these specific versions. But the runtime we are using has updated versions. So now we force the versions we want to use, and we have to specify that we want to reference with these versions so that the ncron tab references are overridden. And I put a message saying remove these references once ncron tab targets net standard to 0. In this case, there won't be any references to wrong versions. I created a PR, and Atif integrated it, and since 20 minutes ago it's now a NuGet. So I created a new PR to remove that, but then some other references were still using bad versions, so I had to update the other ones. In this case, because of AddMvc.core. I'll show you later. So this is just to fix the references so we can self-contained deploy. Fix assets app position when a warning is visible. Yeah, so when you're in the media and there will be a warning on the page, the media app will be completely well, not busted, but there will be UI issues because everything is moved down in a weird way. So this is a PR to fix the issue. This is not a good fix, but this is a fix. And Matthias said it was not a good fix, so I will trust him it's not a good fix. That fixes the issue. Make IRecipeExecutor tenant the singleton. So this is in reaction to a PR we had done 2 weeks ago to fix a setup issue when you could have 2 instances of a singleton in the same tenant. So I did the fix by removing the use of the DI, but then Jean-Thierry fixed the fix by reintroducing the DI and making sure that everything is instantiated correctly. So we trust him, and then this morning I merged this one, which is adding some documentation, some hints, the UI for OpenID applications, that you can enter multiple values. If you don't see that, you don't know you can enter multiple values. So that's a good improvement. And that's it for last week. I'm on the correct. Oh, questions, comments, demos. Does anyone have demos? No demos, but we can talk about the current PRs and steps to the release. So let me show the PRs we have right now, because we don't have demos for these, but they are good PRs. And I hope we could have, I wish we could have demos for that. So apparently my PR didn't work. So I was talking about it. That, oh, first, I was updating dependencies, and 2 hours ago or 3 hours ago, they released a new version of ASP.NET Core, so I updated that to the new version. You see 2.2.2, and also 2.2.2.2, okay. And you see here in the dependencies for ncron tab, I am using 3.3.1, which target net standard, so no more references to different versions as what we use. But then this is not this one that fails, but AddMvcCore, which under 2.2.2 references this package, which references all versions of these packages, which are in conflict with whatever the runtime wants to use. So we have to specifically set references to them and specifically set versions which are in this file at the bottom here. Okay, but I put a comment why we have them and when we can remove them. Okay, I know that MVC 3.0 doesn't reference that anymore, so that should fix it. So that's the PR going on, and apparently it doesn't work on Aveo, which must mean that the functional test don't work. Then PR from Jean-Thierry, this one is interesting, this one is interesting, this one is interesting, and this one is interesting. Okay. So let's talk about it. So this one, so the idea is that when we do something in a request, we, for instance, if we use a database, we want at the end of the request, we want to commit the transaction, the ambient transaction that is attached to the request. The idea being that because we are highly modular and event-based, what can happen is that, like, let's say we do something with the content items, then all the modules can be called to do also something with the content item. But modules don't know each other and don't know what's happening on the content item between different components. And one component might say, oh no, the content item is invalid, so don't save anything. But maybe a previous module tried to save something. So that's why we have an ambient transaction for the full request. And then at the end of the request, if everything went well, so if all modules, if no module said to cancel a transaction, then the transaction will be committed. Okay, so we have the concept of like a unit of work or a work context. And by default, during a request, the request beginning and end are the boundaries of this work context or unit of work. So what we do is, at the end of the request, we commit the transaction if nothing went bad. And what we can do also, because we need to commit a transaction at the end of the request, sometimes we need to do actions after all the things have been done. Because maybe a module will say, do something, and then after everything is stored in a database, then do that. Or maybe we will have 20 events on the same thing, but we know that we need to do a single thing at the end. So we have the notion of a deferred task engine. So if we go here, we have the IDeferred task engine. This is a service that is available in OrchardCore in the abstractions, and you can resolve it and add a task, and it will do a defer task. So you pass a lambda, an async lambda, and what will happen is that once the current unit of work or work context is done, in this case a request, once the scope session, the scoped DI has been disposed, then we'll create a new scope that will execute the deferred tasks. Okay, and every task will be executed in a different scope. So it's like enlisting another unit of work after the current one has been done. Okay, and you can just enlist from any module for the end of the unit of work. So if we have a request, when the request is almost done and the scope is released, then we can enlist another one. Okay, that's the idea. So that's what we have here. The issue we faced is that we would like to be able to do something before the unit of work is done, but just once. So the same thing as the deferred task engine, but in the same scope, but just once. For instance, let me show you where we needed that. If I look at the indexing task manager, this is just an example. There are many reasons you would like to do that. if I look at this thing, create task async, this method is called by modules when they want to create an indexing task. It's just, okay, store a task for later that says that we need to index this content item. So during a request, you might want to import 10 content items, and each of them will call create task async. But what we don't want to do is do a database call for each of them. What we want to do is, okay, we need to create the task, so log the task into a local queue. This is what we have here, okay? And once the current unit of work is done, meaning the request, flush or save all the tasks to the database with one SQL command, okay? Or one communication to the database. So to do that, we do a flush async, which is called with the defer task engine. So we load the defer task engine and we say add a task, which is to flush all the current queue, okay? And it will get its own scope. It will get closure with the task queue we need to store, and it will store it with one command. Okay, that's the goal. So we can batch many things into one command. But this thing will be done in a different scope, so a different transaction from database. So that's bad. We would like to do it in the same transaction as the request. So that's why we introduced, well, Jean-Thierry introduced after some design, a new events on the, where is it? Where is my, okay. On the defer task engine, the goal is that we have like before dispose and after dispose, but we have different names that make more sense, but that's the goal, to be able to queue a task, job, whatever you want to call it, in the current request, in the current scope, at the end of the scope, and also in a separate scope. So you could have the choice. And when I say request as a unit of work, we have other unit of work, like when we are background task, every time the background task is executed, it's not a request, but it's also a unit of work. So we have the same notion of scope, and then the scope is released, and we might have also a deferred task after the background task. Okay. Same thing if we have so background task, we have request, and we have also recipe steps. Every recipe step is its own unit of work. And today we do that. We create a scope for every recipe step, and then at the end of the scope, we execute the defer task engine. So because we have that at 3 different locations, we decided to refactor it by having explicitly this notion of execution context, and reuse this service for request, for background task, and for execute recipe steps. And this way, this is when we ask for a work context, it will instantiate a job for us, a scope for us. It will call into the deferred tasks to all the tasks before the scope is disposed, and it will also execute the after deferred tasks. And you see here a lot of uncompleted callbacks. And same thing for the session. So this way, the session, today we made a middleware to intercept the end of the request to commit the session automatically. Now, but because we have that, when a session is instantiated, it can also resolve this service and say, when the job is done, commit the session before disposing anything. And this way we don't need a middleware, because we can hook up in when the current unit of work is done. So that's the goal of this PR. I haven't reviewed it yet, but that's a lot of work, but that's interesting work and good work. Different tasks. Is it called differently? So using async, well, we'll look at the name later, but execute, yeah. Question. Will this fix the issue where items are not indexed in the scene when batch importing content items automatically? Maybe. I think it should, or it should already work, but maybe. or maybe you are doing some things with the index before the unit of work is done. I have to check. I need a repro, because for me everything works so far. I don't know how you are batch importing, but it should already work.
I'm using the content manager directly.
Yeah, but are you in a request of Orchard? Are you in your own console application?
It's a request on Orchard, yeah. I created a module that just use the content manager directly.
Mm-hmm. So at the end of, oh, if you call publish.
Yeah, that's what I do.
So if you call publish, then it will go in the indexing task manager and it should work. At the end of the request, everything should be in the index.
Should I enable the loosen task background tasks or things like that?
I'm not sure. Well, the first thing you need to check is that there are indexing tasks in the database.
Yeah, there is, because I rebuild my index and it works afterward. It's just not doing it when I had it directly.
So it's not related to that. It's related to the Lucene background task that will not process everything. Or we should process all the indexes as a step of the unit of work. I thought it was doing that already.
I thought too, but yeah.
Okay.
It's working, because when you do it from the Orchard content item from the contents and you're adding a content item, it's working. So I'm not sure what's the difference, because I copied the code from there. It's supposed to do the same thing, but maybe because I'm just batch importing them, it's not handling that much of data at the same time.
Yeah, send me a repro and I will debug. I will see what's happening. That, okay, so that was for this PR, which is interesting. This one is also interesting. Not sure it's all good. I have to check. The idea is that apparently some the root folder had not served. Well, was it actually the initial issue? No, because yeah, ASP append version is using the web rule file provider which is not correctly set with modules, and then it will not find the files in the modules. So it will not append the correct hash to the URL for the ASP.NET Tag Helper. Okay. So this change will set it correctly. And by the way, we realized that if we do that, we don't need the current one we are using for the main, the root folder. So we are looking into that. That's interesting. That should remove a middleware and fix the issue here. And it's not related to the resource manager, so maybe we should also support that in the resource manager. People have asked for that. Cloning events from, so now you're here. We were wondering if JP was for Jean-Paul, Jean-Philippe. We know what JT means, Jean-Thierry, but JP means Jean-Philippe. Okay, thank you. So new PR for cloning. So the goal is to implement localization. Jean-Philippe asked, how can I implement localization? I need it. And we say first, well, Justman told him, first implement cloning. I think Justman told him. So we explained what cloning was and how to do that. And there's been a PR, some feedback, and also some reaction to the feedback. And apparently everything is done. Do you want to do a demo, Jean-Philippe? Can you? No microphone, I'm sure. Okay, good. Let us know. It would be a pleasure to see what you have done and how it works. So Jean-Philippe has started working on that, doing the cloning, because this is the first step to localization. We also updated the design for localization. Let me show you. I need to find the issue. That's the so localization work has started. Just if you know the link. Oh, this one. Okay. By the way, this one it should be fixed by Jean-Philippe's PR. Okay. Okay, localized content items. So the design, it's a little bit different than Orchard 1. Just because we had constraints in Orchard 1 that we don't have in OrchardCore, so we can apply that. So the last design comment I made was, so the localization module will have a localization part, okay, like in Orchard 1. So localization part is added to content types that can be translated, localized. It will provide a custom UI element in the editor to navigate between translations of the same content item using a common identifier called localization set. So when you add localization part to a content type, in the editor we'll have, like in Orchard 1, or better, not worse, a list of existing translations for this current content item. Okay, so when you edit a content item, you will be able to see what are the existing localizations, and also to create a localization for a specific culture. And only the cultures that have been enabled in the settings will be displayed. Okay. Then how will it know which other content items are available for this content item? Because we'll still handle the fact that a localized content item is a distinct content item with its own ID and its own versions. So you can version the English homepage, for instance, or the French homepage differently. They will both have a localization part property, and the common thing between those instances is that one of the property of the localization part will be the localization set, which will be a unique identifier. Okay, it might be another content item ID, but it's a unique identifier. And all the content items with the same localization set are translations of each other. So the localization part will have a localization set and the culture. Okay, this way. So in Orchard we had something, in Orchard 1 we had something called master content item ID, because we could not do a localization set because we already had, before the redesign, the fact that we had a master content item. So the change is that we don't need a master content item ID. This way you don't need a content item in the default language, default culture, to be a translation of something. So let's say I have a site in English as the default culture. With this design, you could have a page in French and a page in Spanish, but not any in English. You don't have to. You probably will have, but you don't have to do that. So you can start creating a Spanish page before creating the English page. And from the Spanish, you can say, I want to create a translation for English, even if it's the default culture. Okay? So that's the goal of the localization set. It's a logical group identifier. And for a localization set, that can only be one content item with the same culture. So you can't have two content items with the same culture and the same localization set. Well, at least I think it doesn't make sense. Okay, did I miss anything? Can you take values from the default culture if a field value is not set in? Yeah, so I will talk about it. A setting is added to, and that's the next paragraph. A setting is added to all fields, so they can be marked as culture neutral. So when we enable the content item localization module, it will provide a culture neutral setting to all the fields. Okay, and if we check that, it means that, oh well, let's go back in the paragraph I didn't write because it's related to the cloning. How do we do the localization? When we are editing a page and we want to localize, well, editing a content item and we want to localize it, we'll click on the localization culture we want to call. And what it will do is call into the content manager's clone feature that Jean-Philippe is implementing right now. So we'll start cloning the current content item in the current culture that we are editing it. And we'll clone it, change the culture of its localization part to the new culture, and then all the cloning events will be invoked so that they will disambiguate any value that should be unique. For instance, the auto route, when we clone an item, should be different. So the event of cloning, nothing to do with localization, the event of cloning an auto route should make it unique, like adding a -1, -2, or whatever. Whatever logic you want to apply on the auto route. Same thing on the alias. When we clone an item, the alias should change by whatever logic the alias part should handle. And then every part is responsible for implementing the cloning event to make the new item unique for their concern. Okay, so when we call into localization for a specific culture, we'll start cloning the item, so it will be unique, a new clone of the previous values with all the previous language values. Okay, and then the alias will be unique, the auto route will be unique, and then once we cloned, we'll call into a custom event for localization. So we gave a way for all the parts to customize their value when the content item is cloned, like the auto route part, and now we'll give another opportunity for these parts to change themselves when the content is localized. So it's more than clone, it's localized. So if there is nothing more to do, because it's localized, then there is nothing to implement. So for instance, the alias, you don't have to do anything more than cloning if you localize it. But maybe the auto route part, because it's localized, maybe you want to change it differently by calling again the pattern, because the culture will be different. And you might know that because the culture is different, the URL will be different. So in the case of the auto route part, there is a cloning event, but the localizing event will also be called to maybe update again the information. Or the content picker. The content picker, because it's referencing items in the original content item, maybe when we localize it, we want to find if there are localization of the reference items in the target culture, and then change the content picker to reference the target culture references that correspond to the original culture references. Okay, and this is what we do in Orchard 1. Same thing for taxonomy and so on. So now each part, each component will be able to react to a localizing event to change their content. So that's what's happening. Now about the fields, sometimes, so each part will handle that because it's part of the logic of the part, but maybe a field should be cloned and not changed, or should be changed per culture. So for instance, the color of a shirt should not change if the shirt is written in Spanish or English. It's blue, okay? So you don't change that. But maybe the price, which will be a numeric field, will be changed based on the culture. So what we do is we have a settings on the field that's called culture neutral, and when it's checked, the localizing event, this default implementation, will copy it will be cloned, but whenever a content item is persisted, if this field is checked, then we'll also update the drafts value of all the other content items of the same localization set so that the field is also changed. This is what we do in Orchard 1. So we'll copy the value, we'll sync all the content items with the fields that should be culture neutral when one has changed. Each translated content item should be draftable, versionable. If it's versionable, we'll store the version. If it's draftable, we'll create a draft. If it's not draftable, we'll change the published content item. even if it's not capture control. What's the comment here? Can you take values from default culture if a field value is not set? If the field value is not set, then the clone won't be set. And whatever happens, if it's culture not role, whatever value is in the field will be synced to all other content items of the same localization set. Localized draft, as I said, I think there is no issue with that. And if we have a question not answered, we should look at what Orchard 1 is doing, because it has been designed and implemented already. Very well. It should say the content item should work as a normal content item. Okay. The content list should be able to list all different localized content items, and the filter could be. This is a way to do that. Yeah. We can look into. So I know, for instance, that I've had some requests to show a matrix of all content items, like vertically and horizontally all the cultures, and checkboxes or whatever hint to say that this exists, this doesn't exist, this hasn't been updated, so that people can maintain all the localizations of all the content items to have a nice view of that. And that could be part of a feature of the localization module. A different approach could be having all the localized versions in a single content item and have localization as a part at the part field level. So another approach, and I thought about it, and maybe that's the good approach. Let's see the pros and cons. So another approach of localization, instead of having different content items, will be that. So today in a content item we have content item ID and content item version ID. Okay, and actually a document is a version. So all the versions of a content item are actually different records, different documents in the database. They are the same content item because they all have the same property named content item ID. It's like content item ID is a logical ID grouping all versions, saying, oh, it's the same content item, but they're all versions. So the same way we could do the culture is another property of a version. So you could have the same content item ID for different culture and different versions. So each version is of a culture of a content item ID. Okay, and this way the localization set is actually the content item ID. That's a way to do that. So in the end, it's not different than. So we will still have 10 documents. Let's say you have 2 cultures and 5 versions of each culture. In both cases, you will have 10 documents. Either the localization set is stored in the localization part, or the content item properties itself is the same thing. So I think we should separate it into a localization part. It won't change anything in the implementation or at the database level. And as Jasmine says, maybe, yeah, no, that should work the same way. We should just have to filter all the time with the culture also. So that might be easier to have different content item IDs because we know which culture it is from the content item ID. So that's it. We will maybe clone. Yeah. Yeah, cloning a content item will be different in this case, so that might make sense to separate the values. Yeah. Nah. Well, what I suggested was not what was suggested. Was to keep having every document isolated, but reference the same content item ID with different culture properties. Okay, Jean-Philippe, do you want to share your screen? Show us what you've done so far. I will make you a presenter if you want, and if you can talk, feel free to unmute and talk. Otherwise, I'll just do the.
Is there a lot of like reverb if you guys talk?
No, it's perfect. Thank you.
All right. How's it going? So.
Thank you. And you?
Can I share a request or how does this work?
No, you don't. No, you don't want to take control of my computer. You just need what? You just need to share.
Where's the share? Right there. Okay, sorry. Share screen. Okay. I hope this still works. Oh, it seems to still work. Let's see. I just came back home. We're expecting like 40 centimeters of snow. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So what I did, I added an alias, I believe, to this guy and tested the permalink as well, which is for the auto route. And if you go to the content items view, and if you, I can clone the clone, I guess, it doesn't matter. So you clone the clone and everything is there. I think that, oh, this is not the right one. Sorry, this one. Clone this guy. Oh yeah, and some breakpoints going on. And all the parts react to the event, and all it is, I reuse the same logic from the auto route into the alias part, I believe. And yeah, everything seems to work, everything I tested anyway. It was very straightforward with the JSON field. You just deep cloned that one and most of it was working. So that's pretty much all I had to do for that.
Perfect.
Do you guys have any questions or?
So when do you do the next step?
The what?
The next step, the localization part, localization module.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to start on that soon, I guess, if you can review this branch. And
yep.
The only thing that didn't work, as I think we discussed, was the list part.
Yeah, that's.
I think that didn't work, but I wasn't. You told me to wait, so.
Yeah, that's an issue with the list itself. So how? Let me check. How did I make the list? I will share the screen just to show the issue. Thank you for the demo.
Yeah, it's very simple.
No, but that works at least, because in OrchardCore it was that simple. It didn't take that. No, I don't know. And also because it's not a JSON document, maybe we had to do many things. Yeah, all the parts themselves have to clone their own content. In OrchardCore here, we don't, because just a JSON document.
Yeah, it's the JSON. Some, like the ones that didn't work, it's just there. You have this coordinator.
So we're talking about the list part. So the list part, if I go in the code, just to show the issue with the list part. So the list part model is nothing. How do you clone nothing? Well, you clone it, it's still nothing. So the issue is that the list part is just a marker for the UI somehow, but what's happening is when you try to add something to a list part, it will change what you're adding to. So example is that it will be a contained part that will be attached or that will be added to the model, to the content of the thing that you attach to a list. And that's kind of bad, a bad design. This guy wrote the bad design. So the issue with that is, if we clone a list part, well, we clone nothing, because so a blog is a list of blog posts. Okay, and a blog is a list. If we clone a blog right now, it will be empty, because a blog post can only be owned by a single list. In this case, well, in the case of a list, a blog post can only be owned by a single blog, because the blog post knows its owner. Okay, and that actually that makes sense. But maybe what we want here is when I clone a blog, maybe I want to clone all the blog posts and point them to me. Like that doesn't, so maybe it's not an issue actually. Maybe when we clone a list, I should, like a blog post should not have two parents. I should not reference the same blog post from the new blog, right? I should have the new blog should have its own blog post, which is a clone of the existing one. Does it make sense?
So could we just iterate through each of child and clone each child and give it the two parents?
That would be the implication, the result of the first the first rule. So if we agree with the first rule, then the implication is that we need to implement it this way. So that's why I'm asking, is everyone agreeing with the fact that when we clone a blog, we should clone all the blog posts. And then we could expand that to anything that is a list should be cloned to. But it depends on how you think a list is. Is a list just pointing to items, referencing items, or is it composed of these items? If it's composed of these items, when you clone a list, you need to clone all the items and have its own life after that. But if you think about referencing other content items, then you need to clone the references. So how the list is implemented is not a list, is a container. When you think about lists, you usually think about referencing stuff. So that's why I'm confused with list, because what it does is fine, and we have a way to clone it. But I'm not sure that we realize what it does because of the name of list. The same way we have bag part, which is composing items, and we talked about calling it container or list, but yeah, maybe we need two kinds of lists. The lists that reference things and the lists that reference things but as their own list.
What's a good use for a list? Like, is the trade-off only for performance versus the bag? Like, why isn't the bag using the bag?
Can I interject in this conversation?
Maybe, yes. And I think what your last comment was exactly that. What's the solution? That's the solution to what we want to do. Okay, go Bertrand.
I think you need to add the concept of aggregate root to the discussion here, which is really important in this context, because if you clone a list and you also clone the items in it, are the items proper content items, in other words, aggregate roots, in which case you would also have to clone everything that identifies it, and you know, depending what the list is containing, that changes the discussion, I think, unless I misunderstand something.
So there's a third level, so like we can add. So, and Bertrand, so we have the back part today. Let's think about the back part. The back part is a collection of content items, and they are stored as a single document. So the back part itself will contain as its content the content items. That is containing. So it's what I would call an aggregate root. It contains everything. This is one single entity, which itself represents many content items, but it's a single document in the database. So when we clone a back part, well, we clone everything as the aggregate root. So if I have a back part with 3 items inside, the clone will have also the 3 items, which are independent because they are part of the main back part. But the list is the total opposite. The list today is just pointed by external independent content items. So when I clone a list, we do nothing. If I cloned a blog post, the way it's done today, it will be added to the same blog, and that makes sense. So
it's a question of semantics in a large way. A blog post is of a blog, and it doesn't exist without the blog. Whereas if you are creating a list of products, like most sold products, you wouldn't expect that when you copy that list, you would copy the products and create new products.
Yes. So, and that's why maybe we need two lists or a property on the list or no, another one. So we have one which today works like for nice for blog and blog post. Maybe we need another one that is a set of content items, but the content items themselves, when you clone them,
it's almost as if the distinction is the same that you have between content item and content type. In the case of the blog post, it's information about the content type that tells you that this content type only makes sense as a child of this other content type. Whereas if you have a list of products, then there is nothing about product that makes it necessary for it to belong to.
Exactly. So what we do today, yes. So today we create a list and we say this list can contain blog post. Actually, that's wrong. We should have created a blog post and say a blog post can only be contained by a blog.
Yes.
And then, so we should have the two different semantics because they both make sense. So that's what I'm trying to say here. Blog and blog post today make sense, but we need another one, which is the opposite relationship. List contains blog post, or list contains things, and not thing is contained by. And we had that, I think. So the contained part is nice. That's what it means. I'm contained by a blog. So a blog post is contained by a blog.
Didn't we have something super similar to that in our child one, where you had the concept of a parent?
We have got container part and container.
Yes.
So maybe we need the same thing. So today list is a container part and contain part is contain part. But how I made that wrongly apparently is that list drives the content part. That's why we might need and that might be fine actually, that list just drives content part because semantically we still think in terms of blog and then we can attach a blog post. That's fine. But maybe we need a container part so we can create a container. And when we create a container, we select what kind of elements it can contain. And when we clone it, we also clone its contained elements.
Yeah.
Or referenced elements, whatever. But we need the distinction between the two, like whatever you add to a container is cloned or not. It's not cloned. It's just referenced. So you can reference. Yeah, that's the 1 to star and star to 1 references.
Yeah.
1 to 1 is the bag today, and 1 star and star 1 is the thing we are missing. Contain and container.
Yeah. So maybe it's worth thinking a little bit more about how cardinality is distinct from that idea.
Well, I think the solution.
But I think you're right. Yeah.
In the solution is the distinction between contain part and container. So you define who is the owner of the reference, and we did that implicitly by using blog and blog post. But we also have examples where it's not correct and we need the other one, and I didn't do that, and I should have done.
I think historically what happened is that we had the one container idea from the start, and we didn't have other ideas that had more flexible cardinality and ability to be in multiple lists at the same time and so on. So we overused that container concept and we misused it. And it led us to develop new features which were not wrong essentially, but that were maybe built for wrong reasons because of time constraints and stuff like that. But here we clearly have the opportunity to get it right the first time. So.
And as you said, historically in Orchard 1, when we built the list feature in Orchard 1, it was because we wanted to build the blog post correctly, but we had time. And in OrchardCore, when we wrote
and we didn't build it correctly.
But on purpose, we didn't have time. Yeah. But on OrchardCore, I said, okay, now we'll build the list feature correctly so that the blog can be a list. Yeah. So we modeled the list to match the blog post paradigm, which is container part. Now we need the thing called container that will match. So Jasma is a good example, I think, a catalog of products. So the catalog is a bag of things, but when I clone the catalog, I don't clone the things. I just reference them again. So that's a good analogy, I think, of a container. A catalog is a if we had to find a new term, it could be a catalog could be a container, and a blog post is contained by a blog. So the fact that when I clone a catalog, I don't want to clone the products, but when I clone a blog, I want to clone the blog post. So maybe it's just a metadata on the list, but no, because at the same time,
no,
the product doesn't have to know.
The product doesn't have to know about lists of products, but the blog post has to know about
the blog. That's why the blog post has a content part, and the catalog should have a container part.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
That's a good discussion. So in this case, you see, Jean-Philippe, for the list, when we clone a list, we will implement the event on cloning of the list to say, well, let's clone all the blog posts and attach them to the list. But for the next part that will come, we'll say, no, I just clone the list and not the items. So that's
of course, in the case of the blog, there is a difficulty, which is the URLs of the blog posts.
Which are that's fine.
If they are defined by autoroute from a pattern that depends on the parent, then it's fine. Yes, I agree.
Yes, and so I assume Jean-Philippe right now is just making it unique by adding a -1 to the route. Maybe it should call into the regeneration of the route. And if it's not unique, then add a -1.
Yeah, it might not be unique as a result of the cloning, right?
Yes. So did you hear that, Jean-Philippe? When we clone the auto route, don't just add the -1. First, re-evaluate the pattern, and if it's not unique, then add a -1. But I assume that re-evaluating the pattern will generate it unique, so you won't have to care. The goal being that when you clone a blog, you will call into all the blog post cloning, and cloning the blog post then will generate its own URL using the new blog clone base prefix. If it's not clear, I can show you later.
Okay.
It's just a calling the auto route cloning event should call the pattern again.
Yeah.
Okay. And just while I have it in mind, so we have a list of things which matches completely the blogs and the blog post. Why don't we call the other thing, the container, a catalog? So we could create a catalog because, maybe catalog, or what is a good name for a catalog? Because catalog, I'm sorry, because of my French, and everyone almost here French is, so catalog, directory is better because you see what I mean? It's just references of things. So when I clone a directory, I don't expect all the things that it references to be cloned. So
tu peux pas déjà faire ça avec le, comment t'appelles ça, le...
Don't switch in French, everyone's listening, you have to say it in English.
I know. Can't you just do the same thing with the content picker field?
Yeah, that's the same ID. Yes, content picker, when you clone a content picker, you just clone the references to the items. That's the same ID, yes.
So why not just use that? Like, why create a new type?
No, I don't want to. It will be a new type. Content picker is a field, so I don't want to. No, that's different. So we need a type.
Okay.
Content picker does the same thing, and there are many things that are a type and also do the same thing in fields or parts. Like bag works the same way in some other types, but just thinking in terms of if we had a new type to represent a collection of things that when you clone it that actually references to other things.
Okay.
Like you could even add existing things to it. You see, a list, you can create a new blog. You can just attach new things because it will own them. Okay. You can't attach a blog post from another blog, or you can move it, but you can't point to it. So this concept of I can point to things. I want to find a name that will be easily understandable by people. The difference between a list and these new things. So catalog, I think, is a good name. Directory, I like it also because, but yeah.
What was wrong with list?
So no, list, we want to keep it. I think we need another type.
Inventory.
What is list?
So list maybe is the wrong name, but the list is contains stuff. Sorry, is a bunch of contained elements. So when you have a list, all the things you add to the list
container for this one and list for the other sounds more natural.
Yes. That's not what we have today. That's the issue. But yes, okay. So you think that's why? So you agree that list today is bad name because that's not how it behaves.
Yeah.
And the new concept is actually what we have today. So a blog is not a list; it's a catalog or a container or something like that.
Yeah.
No, sorry, it's not a container. It's a container. So a blog is a container. So a blog is a container. That's what you say. And a catalog.
It's like a generic type. You should almost always say a container of something, right?
Yes, but that we don't want to be generic in this case.
No. I'm saying it's semantically that's what it is. It's almost always a container of something. Not necessarily. I don't know.
So that we had the same discussion with back part. How do we call a back part? To tell people that everything you add to it will be owned by it. Like a collection of stuff, like a bag of stuff, a set, like a list.
Yeah.
But we need a new thing. That's why, so you say, for you, list should just be references, container.
Yeah.
Collection, a collection of stuff maybe implies the containment, like a blog is a collection of blog posts, but a catalog.
No, actually, I think collection for me it's the same as list. It's more evocative of something that you pick items for
like
it.
Bookmarks, yeah, like a set of.
I think container is pretty accurate.
Okay, I'm not supposed to. Okay, so
contains.
Yeah.
And it's pretty clear that the contained object is in the container.
Mm-hmm.
So if you move the container around, you're moving the objects with it.
And
right?
the list is just a list. It doesn't. Yeah, it just points to things.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so we will have containers and lists, and the current lists type we have is actually. That will be fun. Good discussion. So that's why I commented on that PR, Jean-Philippe, about, well, what do we do with the list part because it's ambiguous. So I will comment on the PR and see what we do. We might do it separately, so I don't want to block you based on that. We will implement the correct behavior, and once we need to change the list. That's my main concern now, is that if we change that, it changes many things, the storage, the templates. So migration is doable. The parts also needs to be changed. So the migration could be concerned. Okay. Well, that's lots of cool PRs. The next one I could not talk about, I hope Matt will be joining at some point, is a profile module. The goal being to define profile pages for viewing and editing a profile of a user on the front end, reusing the same composability of the UI on the front end for this specific entity, which is a user. So we can edit the users and the admin for their security thing, but the profile is more the public or private information from the user's perspective of a user. And that can be accessed on the front end. So themed by the front end and edited on the front end. So with custom editors for the front end, not using fields or parts or anything, but extensibility of the UI for the profile. So you can create modules that will add profile information to be displayed or to be edited on the front end. Your address, your payment information, your orders and everything will be extensions to the profile module to give that access to the front end. Make sense? So we made the module like that. We designed it together and implemented that. Good. Okay. Lots of good discussions. So and everyone is leaving, and that's time. So thank you everyone. I'll follow up on the different PRs and Gitter, and see you on Thursday or next week. Thank you. Bye bye.